Good afternoon, and I am really delighted to be back here again with the African Wonder Women this afternoon. I want to say a big thank you to Princess Folaji for all the work that you are doing among women, and particularly even in the UK and across Nigeria and extending to the nations of Africa. Thank you for all the beautiful work that you are doing and really supporting women, particularly vulnerable women at the period of bereavement and coping with widowhood. So this afternoon, we are turning our attention to men, and the theme for today, which is men do cry, you don't need to man up. That's something that's really very important to me, being a man myself, being a middle-aged man. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to share thoughts this afternoon that would actually help us, not only as women to support the men in our lives, but also to help men to handle our emotions and also to find positive outlets and to actually know that it's okay to ask for help as a man. It's okay to say that one is not okay and to actually get the help that one needs. So whilst we are doing that, with those thoughts on mind, I'm just going to share my screen and I'm going to get into showing the slides as we continue. Right, so I'm going to be sharing a few thoughts and tips. Usually I do give a disclaimer saying that this presentation is mainly for public mental health education and it's not a personal consultation by any means. So please do consult with your healthcare provider, mental care provider, in taking decisions about your mental health. That's really very crucial. So when you look at this picture, what exactly do you see? I just want us to reflect on this for a moment. We see a black man who is blowing into a blue balloon. But really, for me, what I see is this. This is the state of a lot of middle-aged men, particularly a lot of Black middle-aged men in terms of mental health and mental well-being. And sometimes, in fact, in terms of physical health. It's like progressively you start blowing into a balloon and progressively the balloon gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the reality is that there is so much air that a balloon can take. At some point, if there is no outlet, if there is no positive way of letting the air out of that balloon and you keep blowing into it, unfortunately, what would happen is that there will be a burst. And sadly, in our community, particularly recently, within the last few weeks, there was the sad event of the DJ Ola suicide that took place in Nigeria. But that's not the only one that takes place. We know that suicide is commoner than we think, that 1 in 4, that actually every 40 seconds, somebody dies, takes their own life by suicide. And that globally across the nations of the earth, that about 800 suicides actually take place every year, and that 20 million people actually attempt their lives. So that's huge. But when today we really want to concentrate on our men, we want to concentrate on the mental health of our men. And the reason is because we know that suicide is also very closely linked to mental health. We know that the problems with mental health can be very closely linked to suicide. And so just looking at the figures, because it's important to look at the figures. Why, for instance, is suicide commoner in men? Because the reality is that suicide is commoner in men than in women. We know that 1 out of 8 men will usually admit to common mental conditions like depression and anxiety. And 2 of those 3 men would actually admit that in the past year, they have been feeling overwhelmed. So men also cry, just like we said in the theme, that men also cry and that men don't need to man up. What we need is a safe, sensitive place where men can actually get the support for the mental health of mental difficulties that men face. So 2 out of 3 men admit to feeling overwhelmed. And then taking it further, 1 out of 3 actually say that they experience suicidal thoughts. So suicidal thoughts are things that are common that maybe people accept or maybe people admit. So what can we do about it? The reality is also that out of those men who admit to suicidal thoughts, a lot of men, only 25% of men, a study was carried out, and only 1 out of 4 men actually feel able to speak to anyone in their lives, either a spouse or a friend or a pastor or a church leader or a religious leader, or maybe even a work colleague about their mental health problems or about their emotional distress. That's a problem. Because if there are so many men who admit to mental distress, but only few admit to having a safe place or somebody that they can go to, then there's a problem. And what is the problem? The problem is that we now find that globally, suicide rate among men is twice as common than among women. And when we look even closely, when we come to the United Kingdom, it actually shows that 75%, 3 out of every 4 suicide is committed by men. That is huge, one. And secondly, it's also a call to action. It is a call to action. And if there's anything that I want to put out there today, it's a call to action. Let's not just listen to this presentation, listen to this video, listen to Dr. Adia and say, oh, yes, that was a good talk, or maybe it looks like he knows what he's talking about, or he doesn't even look like he knows what he's talking about. But importantly, let's take action. We can do something. And that's what today is all about, that we can actually do something. Like the African Wonder Women are doing something, we can do something. So really, what do we also know? Why is there a problem with men expressing emotions? How do men, for instance, when men are suffering from trauma, when men experience the pain of loss and the pain of bereavement, why do men find it difficult to actually express those emotions and talk about them in a safe way? We have said that one of the themes, the overarching theme for these events are that every emotion is valid. So one, the reason why men don't talk about emotions or find it difficult to deal with trauma and bereavement is, one, the way society has programmed us as men from growing up. From growing up, you hear things like, man up, big boys don't cry. Big boys don't show emotions. I'm a tough man, tough to be tough. And all of this send a message to men as we are growing up, as we go through the rite of passage, that men are emotionless, which is not true, because everybody is made up of emotions. We all have feelings, we all have emotions. The feeling, the other thing that we send out, the other message that we send out to men is that actually, if you're a man, you are not allowed to show your emotions. It's not acceptable in society for you to accept or even show that you have any emotions, talk more of even displaying those emotions. So it almost feels like men then feel like they're in a cage in which we are just caged in and there's no positive outlet. Because I'm sure that most of us would have experienced men in our lives, or some men are listening to me today, when as a result of showing your emotions in public, you've been discouraged, you've actually been maybe even made fun of, or somebody has treated you in a less favorable way because you showed emotion. Recently, a young man spoke to me about how a male relative of theirs had called them because they cried publicly at an event where they were the main star of the event. They were giving a speech, all the attention was on them, and they showed emotions. And the male relative called them and said that, no, men don't do that. And I'm talking about something that happened within the last 5 years. So in this day and age, we are still propagating that message that men shouldn't show emotions, which is very wrong. Because the problem is that when we don't allow men to show emotions and to express emotions in the way it should be expressed, in a safe way, like grieving in a safe way, support, receiving help in a safe way, what then happens is that men turn to unhelpful ways of managing those emotions. And what are those unhelpful ways? It could be drinks, alcohol, it could be drugs, illicit substance use, it could be gambling, it could be promiscuity, it could be violence. All of those things are unhelpful ways or just isolating themselves and just going into a shell. But the reality is that emotions would, one way or the other, find themselves. They would express themselves one way or the other. So I've talked about the fact that these are things that we've been programmed to do from the cradle. That's the way men have been programmed to behave from the time we were boys. So what do men then do when we are faced with challenges, trauma, loss? What are the ways that men respond? Usually, it's very common that men self-isolate. There's also research showing that men are less likely to seek support, to go out and ask a friend or go out and talk like women express their emotions. Men are more or less. But the reality is that doesn't negate the fact that men still have those emotions. The reality is that men equally feel and wish to talk. But the only difference is that we are looking for a safe, sensitive space where we can have those conversations. And if there is a man in your life today, or maybe you've got a brother or an uncle or a dad or a spouse that you need to support, this is something to always recognize, that it's not that men don't talk. It's not that men want to talk about it. The research shows actually that men want to talk about emotions, but the problem is finding a safe, sensitive place where that conversation can take place. And that's the challenge. And that's the challenge that I'm throwing out to us today, that really we can create those spaces. Men can create those spaces for other men, and that actually the women in our lives can actually help us to find those places and to create those places. So I've said that it's men, or the other issue, that the other way that men also grieve differently or handle trauma differently from women is that men tend to do rather than be. So men, we've been programmed to do. We are problem solvers. We are people who fix things. So and the message we've been given from the word go is that you should be stoic. You should be in control all the time. You should have a stiff upper lip. You shouldn't show any emotions. So we tend to do things we tend to live life by doing. And that's a clue to actually supporting men with bereavement and with trauma. Because rather than, sometimes people find that activities where men come together, maybe for football, maybe even for a DIY sort of program, or even for walking, for hiking in the gym, those are the places where we can actually take these messages to, because that's where men meet. That's where men that's where men feel the sense of belonging. And there are actually new programs that are taking place now where the ethos is to bring those mental support to the football pitch, to the rugby club, to the soccer pitch. That's the places where people are now targeting, because those are the places where men congregate, and probably that's the best way to actually get the message out. So loss is not just, it's important for us to recognize today that bereavement and loss for men is not just about spouses. We know that on top of the scale, in terms of the challenges that men have in terms of mental well-being or in terms of losses, is the loss of a spouse. In fact, the life event scale, which is a scale that was devised to look at the different losses and the impact that the different losses men have or women have. They found out that the loss of a spouse was rated 100, which is 100 out of 100, is the most challenging experience of loss that anyone can experience. However, it doesn't stop at that. Men also grieve when men lose spouses in terms of losing a marriage. So it's not just loss of a spouse in terms of death, loss of a spouse to divorce, to separation, loss of children, loss of access to children as a result of the end of a marriage or difficulty of a marriage, loss of social roles and status. When a man loses a job, or he loses his business, or he even loses his role in society, or he loses his role, a leadership position, all of those things cause grief. And those are things that we need to bear in mind when we are thinking about the men in our lives. Also, sometimes when men move away from their support systems, just like women feel those emotions, men also do. Loss of a parent. People think that, oh, he's a middle-aged man now, his mom died, his dad died, big deal. There is a big deal, because that's a loss of something significant. That's a loss of a solid and sturdy support system. and also a loss of a connection with the past and history and memories. So all of those things, or even when men lose grace, they fall from grace, they lose influence as a result of moral failings. All of those things can actually result in bereavement and in a sense of grief and a sense of loss. And those are things that we need to be aware of. So how do we support the men in our lives who are actually going through periods of grief, or who are going through some sort of grieving process or the other? And let's remember now that we are talking more than just grieving in terms of grieving a spouse, grieving other things, other losses. It's important to acknowledge that loss, to acknowledge that, to acknowledge it with sympathy and show that, yes, I can only imagine what you are going through at the moment, but you are entitled to whatever you are going through. Because one of the things that men don't want to hear is that you invalidate our emotions. So it's important to actually acknowledge that there is a pain here, and you are entitled to that pain, and show genuine concern and interest. Let them know that you really care for them. And also the creation of a safe space. Creation of a safe space. I'm going to further talk about how we can actually create those safe spaces for our men to be able to express those emotions in a way that we don't feel judged, that we don't feel stigmatized, that we don't feel belittled, or that we don't feel condemned, or that we don't feel like we are being pushed to the side. So a safe space is very, very important. And that safe space, there's things that we can do to actually create that safe space. And of course, sometimes it's just about being with that man, just being silent, holding their silence with them, and sitting with them at the periods of silence, and just being there, just saying, I'm here for you. I know life is difficult at the moment, but I'm just here. Even in the silences, even in the nods, even in the hums, we're there riding through thick and thin. And the other thing, don't ask them what they can do. It's best to identify a need and meet that need. A lot of men don't like to ask for help. So if you ask, what can I do? The answer is going to be nothing. I'm okay. Because remember that the programming from the very early onset is that you should always have it all together. So if you ask him, what can I do to help? The likely answer is going to be, no, everything is okay. But if you identify a need and you provide that need, you meet that need, then you are going the extra mile and you're actually being of support. And that's not likely to be declined. But if you ask what you can do, you probably will get a no. So the bottom line, really, one of the most, in fact, the worst adverse consequence of poor mental health for a man is suicide. That's the worst mental outcome. And that's what we want to try to prevent. But in trying to prevent that, as we talked to this afternoon, I think it's important for us to also recognize the possible myths, the lies that we've believed about suicide. One of them is that suicide is not preventable. That couldn't be furthest from the truth, because the reality is that actually suicide, both among men and women, is preventable. It's something that we can do something about. Of course, the other thing is that people think that you only need to be a mental professional to be able to do something. That's also not true. You can actually do something, whether you're a mental professional or not. You can take away tips from today now that you can use in your life in terms of supporting the people in your life that are men. The other thing that people also erroneous beliefs is that if you ask somebody about suicide, if you ask them whether they're feeling suicidal or they're feeling fed up with life, that can actually sow a seed in their lives or into their minds to make them do what they didn't want to do before. That's also not true. The reality is that suicide is a very big event, and before anybody embarks on it, they would have thought about it, they would have contemplated, they would have it would have been there for some time. It would have So you can't sow a seed into somebody's mind just by talking about it or asking them. You are better off being wrong by asking them than actually only finding out after the event that you are right all along, but you didn't act on your gut instincts. And the other thing is that there are people who don't have a mental illness but still die from suicide as a result of the pressures of life, bereavement, trauma, loss, all the other losses that I've spoken about earlier. So it's important to bear that in mind as well. And that suicide attempts are not an attention-seeking behavior. Okay. One of the things we need to know is who are the men that are at risk in our lives? Middle-aged men, low-income earners. People also, research also shows that men with different sexual orientations, so gay men have also been shown to be also more at risk of suicidal acts. Black and Asian men in the UK have also been found to be more at risk. And men that are experiencing life events, that could be from going away to university, to leaving home, starting a new job, or losing a spouse, or even things like divorce or separation, or being separated from children. All of those are life events that could actually then cause there to be problems and mental difficulty, then leading to contemplating suicide or actually carrying out a suicidal act. So the question to ask ourselves is this: what can I do to actually support the men in my life? Or how can I even recognize that this man is in trouble? Maybe it's an uncle, and maybe it's an uncle, a brother, or a male work colleague, or even a church leader, or maybe a religious leader, or somebody who's your boss, or somebody who works under you. One of them, I said earlier that men tend to respond with things like anger, anxiety, moodiness, agitation to trauma. So when that happens, and you begin to see that there's a change in personality or behavior, it's an indication to look closely. And then people might begin to talk about the fact that they're a burden on others. They might talk about the fact that their problems are insurmountable. Currently, 2 days ago in the UK, the interest rate was raised by 0.5%. They say that in the last 40 years or so, in the last 14 years, that's the most significant raise. A lot has been anticipated in terms of the impact that it's going to have on the economic status of the community, on the economic status, on economic well-being. And men as breadwinners are going to feel that in a personal way. And so if there's really a time to look out, it's a time. Now is the time. And I know that across the globe as well, across the nations of the earth, things have been challenging economically for a lot of families. So the breadwinners in those families, the men in those families, are people to look out for. How are they coping? And then, of course, turning to the use of alcohol and substances. If you see somebody who's just suddenly becoming more and more, you find them drinking more or using substances more, that's a warning sign. And then if they suddenly begin to get interested in planning their wills, putting their house in order, when in actual sense, there's no reason for it. Of course, I think it's important for everyone to have a will. Everyone who is married should begin to have a will and to do all those things. However, if suddenly somebody then becomes unusually more interested in planning those things and putting things in order, it could actually be because they are planning to take their life. And of course, the other thing is about appetite, sleep, and energy changes. It could be eating more, sleeping more, or eating less, or sleeping less. And it could also be just not wanting to engage with life at all. When all of those things happen, it's one of the things that we can do in supporting those people, if we find them, is one, to show care, have patience, just the patience to sit with them and really just spend time. Use open questions to initiate conversations. And then just really have the courage to ask the question in the first instance, because it's a big deal. I mean, really asking somebody whether they feel life is no longer worth living, it's quite a big thing. It's not something to be taken for granted. And you might feel that, how do I start the conversation? And for those who might be asking, how do I start the conversation? I've got something that you can think about in order to start that conversation. One of them is being authentic. Authentic is about not worrying about your qualification. I'm not a mental professional. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a mental nurse. No, It's not about that. It's about being a genuine, empathic human being, talking to another human being about their mental well-being. And I want to encourage our men today. Really, I really want to give that message out there, that there is no need to man up. That man up, don't cry slogan, the way we've been raised, particularly in Black African communities, has not served us. I mean, the DJ Ola example is one of them, and it's something that we see in our society and in our community very commonly, that manning up and not showing emotions does not serve us. So if we get that person who comes with an authentic, genuine, empathic approach towards us, I encourage us to please open up and engage with the help. That is really very crucial. So of being authentic, no matter who you are, really being thoughtful and being an interested person in a genuine way is one of the principles that we need to adopt. And the other one, of course, is not being cautious not to jump into conclusions. Just being there to listen. Men don't want to be judged. One of the things I've found out in my interaction with men, particularly when it comes to mental well-being, is that no man wants to be told how to run their lives. Every man wants to feel self-sufficient and wants to feel that they're in charge, even when everything is still not going to plan. So it's very important that we are very cautious of this and not be judgmental. Of course, confidentiality is another one, a big deal breaker for most men. Confidentiality is really about the fact that if you spill your guts out to me, you can be sure that I'm not going to spill your guts out to the world. It's about really being able to give that confidence that you can hold me in confidence. Of course, confidentiality, there's a boundary to confidentiality. If for any reason a man is then at the risk of either taking their own lives or somebody else's life is at risk as a result of their mental well-being or their mental state, in that case, the good thing to do will be to let them know that it's not safe to hold this information to yourself any longer, and that you will need to share that information. And sometimes that's the only way to move things forward. But confidentiality is key. And that confidentiality then includes really finding a place where you can be a private place where there's no distraction, and also a place where you can be sure that they have your full attention. Thinking about distractions, making sure that you are really giving an undivided attention, and that sometimes you actually plan ahead to make sure that the distractions are well taken care of before you go into those conversations. And of course, the other thing is about exchange. Usually when I talk to men about mental well-being and mental health, I share a bit of myself. I try to be as vulnerable as possible, because the reality is that vulnerability is easy. You go first. If we are talking about men wanting to be vulnerable, that man who is sharing that emotion or sharing that space is also, it's important that you share some of your own vulnerabilities as well. Because when you share that vulnerability, it sort of makes things common. It sort of makes you know that we are on an even playing field, and that I'm not judging you, I'm not condemning you, I'm not looking down on you, but I'm actually coming as another man to man, to support you at this period of difficulty, because the reality is that the next time you could be on the other side of the table. And of course, the other thing that is also very important is that it's also important to then celebrate whatever they shared with you, in terms of really appreciate the fact that somebody has opened up to you. It takes guts to be able to open up and talk about what's happening. So it's important that one actually appreciates that, and that one celebrates the man who has actually shared information, so that they don't leave the place feeling, what have I just done? How have I just let myself down like that? So I've talked about authenticity, attentiveness, mutuality. Mutuality is about sharing a bit of yourself, sharing some of your challenges as well. If you've had mental challenges in the past, sharing that with another man can be very helpful in helping them to also share their own challenges. Coming as a peer rather than a superior, or coming as telling them about how to live their lives. So just in terms of either it's the woman or another man trying to help the men in our lives, or even you as a man helping another man in your life. These are things to think about. Am I in a good headspace myself? Am I willing at this point to genuinely listen? Or are there other things that are happening in my own life that I need to deal with that is so crowded in my life that I don't have the space for somebody else? Can I give as much time as needed? Do I accept they might not be ready to talk? Sometimes the first time you try might not be the time that you will succeed. It might be going back over and over again. And have I chosen somewhere private and comfortable? Have I figured out a good time to chat with them? Not when they are going to more likely to listen as well. And then am I sure that I've made enough time to chat? And all of this, if there are people who may want to learn about more, how do I support the men in my life? What are the things I can do? And even maybe you're a man who wants to seek more support. A very good website to go on to is www.rruk.ag.org.au. It's an Australian website, and there's quite a lot of information there about really supporting people in terms of dealing with mental well-being, particularly in terms of preventing suicide, and actually generating that conversation about mental well-being. There are also a lot of there are some of the websites I've just shown on the screen now. The Samaritans is a very good one. There is also a website, particularly an organization called CALM. CALM is campaigning against living miserably, and it's really for men. It's dedicated to the mental well-being of men. They run an advice a chat web, and they run a helpline from the hours of 5 p.m. till 8 a.m. every morning. That's 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. So it's the evening hours. And their contact number is 0800 58 58 58. There's also lots of support sites now for men. There's Papyrus, which is really for young people. It's specifically for young people. And I've talked about the Samaritans. There's the Are You Okay as well, which is really a place where you can actually also coach yourself if you are thinking about how to broach these conversations, difficult conversations with the men in your life. So I do hope that we have found this of benefit, but more importantly, the message that I really want to give out to men out there tonight, this afternoon, is this: please do ask for help. It's okay not to be okay. Mental problems are commoner than we admit, and asking for help is not a sign of weakness. The first place to start would be confiding in somebody. That could be your healthcare professional, it could be your general practitioner, it could be a friend, it could be a spouse, it could be a brother, it could be a sister. Just confide, speak to somebody first. Suicide is something that is preventable, and it's something that we all as community, corporate organizations, churches, religious organizations should be working to prevent. However, it's all our responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility to really prevent suicide. And I really do hope that there is something that you can take away from today that would help you to support the men in your life. And for the men who are listening, I hope that some of the resources that I've shared have been helpful. Some of the information I've shared have been helpful. And in conclusion, I also wanted to refer to a suicide prevention event that I will be hosting on Thursday, 29th September, also on Zoom, and the details are also here. Once again, thank you, Princess Folaji, for this opportunity. It's always a joy to support the work of African Wonder Women, and I do hope and pray that African Wonder Women continue to grow from strength to strength and from glory to glory. Or also going to be happy to take any questions that people may have that would have to be will be sent to me, and then I could respond to them. Thank you everyone for listening, and please remember that it's our responsibility as community to support the men in our lives. But not only so, if there's any man who is listening to me today, I want to encourage you not to man up. It's okay to express emotions. It's okay to discuss how we feel, and it's okay to ask for professional help. Thank you, and God bless.